So when people want to say that something is difficult to do, they say it's rocket science. But here's the thing, we have actually built rockets. You know, we have gone to the moon, we have gone to Mars, we have not cracked quantum computing.
Du lytter til Fremtidens Kapital. En podcast, der undersøger, hvordan kapital i innovation og vækst er med til at forme fremtiden. For kapital handler om mere end afkast. Den handler om at skabe udvikling, drive forandring og sætte retningen for, hvor vi bevæger os hen, lokalt og globalt. Denne podcast er produceret af Mazanti-Andersen advokatpartnerselskab. Vi har et af Danmarks største teams dedikeret til rådgivning af kapitalforvaltere og investorer. I denne serie møder vi en række aktører, der hver især arbejder for et stærkere og mere innovativt Danmark. Vi møder dem, der tør satse, skabe og forme fremtiden, og dem, der på hver deres måde sætter sit præg på fremtidens kapital. The world's largest investment fund dedicated to quantum technology has been launched. Today, we will speak with team members from 55 North and with V-Squared Ventures about the story of 55 North. We will talk about why a quantum fund, why now, and why in Denmark. In the studio today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Owen Lossman and Kai Hydek, both co-founders and managing partners of 55 North, and Michael Jobst, principal at V-Squared Ventures. Welcome, all three of you. It's a pleasure to have you here. For those listening who are not yet familiar with 55 North, to give a bit of background, this fund is based on the initiative of EIFO and Novo Holdings, who have committed so far 134 million euro into this fund. You're targeting a fundraise of 300 million euro. You are a dedicated quantum fund, currently the world's largest. You are in strategic partnership with German-based investment fund V-Squared Ventures and US-based investment fund Cambium Capital. EIFO, Novo, V-Squared, Cambium looked for the right team to drive this mission. They looked at you, Owen, Kai, and Helmut Katzgraber, who's not here today. We will hear from him in the next episode about quantum technology. And the three of you decided to move to be based in Denmark to make this vision a reality. Maybe just a brief background of what is it that you come from professionally, maybe also education-wise, and also geographically. Owen, do you want to go first?
I'll start. Thank you, Julie, and nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So by background, I'm from the UK, an ex-European, as you might call me. I've spent the last kind of 25 to 30 years of my career working in and around the chemical industry as a scientist. I studied a PhD in organic materials, which are useful in semiconductor applications. And then, I worked in various roles in large corporates, mainly in R&D, research and development roles. So basically, running teams of scientists to solve technical problems which could lead to new products for customers, and largely chemistry-based. The last role I had was with Merck, the German science and technology company. I was running a deep tech corporate venture fund, and we developed a lot of technologies around semiconductor. We invested in a lot of early-stage companies around semiconductors, photonics, and advanced materials. And we spent an awful lot of time looking at how materials could impact and create new paradigms in computing, and that was basically led to the interest in 55 North. So, running a venture fund is the best job in the world. I always said this: for a scientist like me to have the opportunity to be involved in venture, it gives you exposure to such a breadth of amazing people, amazing technologies, amazing companies as well. And we're trying to solve really difficult problems. That's the great thing about venture. It's very high risk, but high return. So you get to try a lot of really interesting and different things. And we'll come to the story of why 55 North and why we moved to Denmark. But to sort of skip to the chase, I spent the last 7 years in Amsterdam building this deep tech fund in Merck. And then we've just moved the family literally last week. So this is my second day back after the big move. And we've established ourselves here. I've been in Denmark since July, and it's been great to bring the family over. And it's been really nice to kind of get settled into Denmark and to start this journey.
My background is basically quantum top to bottom. And to continue with what Owen said, actually, this job in venture capital is very exciting because I get to go from what was a very deeply focused and sort of single stream technical approach to a broader base on trying to bring up the whole community and learn as much as I can about making this quantum a reality. It's really a privilege actually to use your PhD for what you got, for what you studied, because a lot of the times nobody cares. You do the hardest thing in the world that's important to 2 or 3 people, and then you go get a job, something else. And so that's actually the thread that ran through my career, which is that I always picked what I found most interesting, and the money would come later, and it served me well. So I'm from the U.S. I'm from Colorado originally, so I grew up in a beautiful place. I did high school, started physics and learning and sort of following that journey at the teenage years. Did an undergrad in sort of engineering physics, applied physics. I did that because I didn't know what else to do. That's what one does, right? When they have nothing better to do, they get a physics degree. But that was also true for going to grad school. I applied for jobs with laser companies or doing little things that didn't seem super interesting. And I went to the University of Colorado and got a PhD in sort of atomic physics. So that sounds exotic, but it's one of the leading modalities for quantum computing and quantum sensing right now. So I built a lot of technology to bring quantum physics from the lab into the real world. And this was well before anybody actually knew that was going to be important. My PhD advisor is actually the founder of Inflection, which is one of the leading quantum computing and cold atom sort of technology companies. And so I was incubated at an early age without really knowing what it meant to be sort of more applications oriented, which has also served me well. After my PhD, again, I tried to look for jobs, didn't find them super interesting. And I met Jungsang Kim, who was the future co-founder of IonQ and found it to be very inspiring, and followed my gut on wanting to work for people that I really, appreciated and kind of looked up to, wanted to be like in certain ways. So that took me out of Colorado to North Carolina. So I spent 3 years as a postgraduate, working on scalable ion trap technologies. And when that was wrapping up, Jungsang and Chris Monroe, who is a professor at the University of Maryland, had formulated this idea about starting IonQ. So I worked for Chris Monroe as a research scientist, moved to Maryland, doing some government-sponsored research that sort of served as the foundation for IonQ's like early generation of quantum computers. So my career after graduate, my only job I've had before this was at IonQ, which turned out to be a good choice again, right? It was my first job, but it wasn't a real job. It was everything I wanted. It was the right people, the right mission, which is to change the world. So it wasn't boring. And if you haven't been a part of a startup, I highly encourage it because it's sort of it's the best job in the world. And so this turned out to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I was, I hired and led the first optical engineering team at IonQ. I hired and led the first systems engineering team at IonQ. As the engineering team grew, I spun out the sort of R&D department that then grew. And then I was part of the sort of founding team of the production department. So the last job I had at IonQ was in production, trying to, in a real sense, take lab stuff and put it into sort of the product mode and into the value creation mode. And I was the sort of chief engineer and system lead, site lead for IonQ's full stack quantum computer sale to Quantum Basel. So I moved to Europe about 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago, and that made this transition to Denmark nice and easy and fun.
But I think it's safe to say already now with what you're telling us is that there is indeed substance to you both in terms of education and experience, right? And I think this is something that we will talk about also later on. So now I'm looking at you, Michael. Maybe you just want to give a brief introduction of yourself as well?
So actually, I also have a background in physics, which is kind of to be expected in this setup. I studied in Regensburg, beautiful city, but then I also spent a year in Boulder, Colorado, and I can confirm that it is indeed a fantastic place to live. Then I went to the Max Planck Institute for Quantum Optics and built a bunch of really crazy lasers. So we were in the Guinness Book for the shortest pulses of light ever created at that time. At 72 attoseconds, by the way, if anybody's listening. So all of that sounds really cool, but as you can see from the fact that nobody knows what an attosecond is, there's still not really an application, right? And even though there was a lot of, spotlight on the field, but still no application. And I was kind of a little bit fed up with that, and I wanted to see more impact in the world. So I transitioned and I said, I have to get into the world of business. Where do I learn the most about companies and strategy and all that sort of thing in the shortest possible time? Which was the motivation that drove me to join the Boston Consulting Group. I wanted to do that for 1 year, maybe 2 years, to sort of like get this business stamp and say, okay, like this guy's not just a physicist, but he can also do other things. And then I did not want to stay there for so long. I just ended up staying there because I liked it. Eventually, I realized what really motivates me is this step change technology, this, like venturing out into the unknown. I've always tried to be at the cutting edge of things. And that's why I joined V-Squared. And V-Squared invests in all of deep tech. It can be rockets, lasers, encryption technology, invasive brain-computer interfaces, and quantum. So that's why I was extremely happy when I saw the first signs that there might be an opportunity to sort of really turn my favorite hobby into an even larger part of my job. And so I'm very happy that I can now, well, I shouldn't say happy, I'm blessed, actually. This is a really special thing that I can now spend 50% of my time with 55 North.
So why was it interesting for V-Squared Ventures to actually be part of this initiative, 55 North?
Yeah, so let me rephrase that question a little bit, because before you just said to my two colleagues here, what made you say yes? And funny enough, when we first talked about this initiative, we first said no.
Mm-hmm. We all said no, Michael. Lots of times before we said yes.
Yes. This is an important point, because I think the interesting stuff usually is not simple and straightforward. It's something that has to be shaped through interaction and through lots of discussion. So one of our partners, Herbert, he was also very, very much involved in setting up this fund. So he had these thoughts like rummaging around in his head, and he thought the whole thing was interesting, but not in the way that it was initially proposed. So he asked, well, maybe this is not for us. This has to happen. Maybe not with us, but it does have to happen. Then he was talking to Dave from Cambium, and he asked him, and Dave was CEO of IonQ previously in a previous life. Yeah. And so naturally, Dave said, no. So
starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah. And but also with Dave, the whole thing was really interesting. There was too much substance to it to just let it go. So after a lot of iteration, we sort of came up with this mode where it wouldn't be a V-Squared fund, and it wouldn't be a Cambium fund. It would be a fund like of its own, because that's the way that we also think that these things tend to work at all. It's if you have a team that owns this, that is fully incentivized and motivated to make it like their fund, which it is now, right? So this is Kai's and Helmut's and Owen's fund, and we are helping them. So then we figured out a way to say, okay, we sort of like kickstart this, and then we'll have the team lead this, but we have to kickstart it, and we have to find a team. So very, very early in the process, Owen's name came up. So naturally we asked him, and guess what he said? Yes. Okay. So he literally, he did. So there was a process involved here as well. Mm. And so it took a couple of months for all of us to sort of like coalesce. And as you can see now, it was not obvious from the beginning, but it was also kind of obvious that we couldn't drop it because it was just too interesting. So that begs the question, like, what does make it so interesting? Why did we all say yes in the end? So there are two things that we have to say yes to, right? So it's to establish a new fund. So for your perspective, it's to go into venture capital, and for the people who were already in venture capital to fully focus on the quantum side. So this is not a new vertical for us, right? V Squared had invested in IQM, and obviously Cambium had the quantum exposure, but both funds didn't have any recent quantum investments. So that highlights, that combined with the fact that there's a lot going on in quantum. Just look at the past few months, how many big rounds were raised, how many tech announcements there were, both from Europe and the US. Like it feels like the space is really, really hot right now. But why didn't we do any investments then? Well, because this is a very, very complicated field. So when people want to say that something is difficult to do, they say it's rocket science. But here's the thing. We have actually built rockets. We have gone to the moon. We have gone to Mars. We have not cracked quantum computing. So this is very, very hard. So it's very, very hard to do. And it's also very, very hard to judge which approaches actually make sense. You can come at this as from a generalist point of view, and V Squared is a generalist deep tech fund. So it does require very specific knowledge to really make the right bets. And if you combine this, hey, the field is hot. There's a lot of value in this, but you have to have very, very specific knowledge to actually capture that value. That just means, yes, it does make sense to do this, but to do it in a very specialized setup. And that is what 55 North is.
So I think maybe thinking about the reasons why we said no is will help us to get to why we got to yes. For me, I was very happy in my job. I'd built a very successful fund. I had a team which was like my family. I loved them. We'd been together for 7 years. We built a huge portfolio of amazing technologies. We were just starting to see first returns from that. What were the reasons why I was hesitant, apart from the fact that I was very comfortable and happy in that? Quantum is a very hard topic, right? And, as a user of it and, trying to develop, computational chemistry over the years to help address some of these challenges in manufacturing, et cetera, and in understanding the properties of materials, there's always a gap in terms of the quantum understanding that prevented us from being really efficient in that. So, I had a bit of an itch to scratch in terms of really thinking about, using these technologies. But as Michael said, it's a relatively early stage of technology. There's still a lot of scientific risk. There's no clear path to, a measurable value in the sense that normal venture assets are valued in a way. So it's a very long-term thing. It's a very, very deeply expert topic. And if you're a generalist fund, you're always going to chase the earlier returns. You're going to invest in the technologies where you can see value creation in the shorter term. So what eventually got me to yes was a few factors. One was, I'd been looking at this semiconductor technology. We'd invested in front-end semiconductor, looking at manufacturing technologies and architectures that would allow smaller transistors. So this is the Moore's law, progression of Moore's law. We then, maybe 10 years ago in research and development and sort of 5 years in terms of venture, started to look into advanced packaging. People may have heard of CoWoS, which is a TSMC technology, which has driven most of the recent advances in AI. So all of the NVIDIA chips that we're seeing, these huge accelerations for AI, is largely driven by advances in packaging technology, not by smaller transistors. So in the industry, this is called more than Moore. So what comes after Moore's law. And I was thinking, what comes next? What's the next paradigm, what shift in computing? What's going to really break us out of this kind of paradox that we're in now? We have these huge, computational power in these data centers, but look at the way that that's been executed. We're spending trillions on, we're having to re-engage our nuclear power in order to power these, huge data centers. This is a very inefficient way of doing computing. The gains could be huge, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the industry, large language models, ChatGPT, and other things like this. But it's a very inefficient way of doing compute, and it only takes you to a certain point. So when you're looking at this long-term path and what comes next, as we are in venture 5 to 10 years out, it started to become clear to me that we can't just keep doing smaller transistors. We can't just keep thinking about how we get more into the package. Photonics will get us so far. But we need more compute. The demand for compute will continue to grow to fill however much compute we can provide. And there's got to be a shift in paradigm, a new architecture, a new way of doing it in order to really get to the solutions that we as humanity need. Better drugs, understanding global warming, various factors like this. And it was clear to me that quantum computing is the only kind of option that we have in that sense, really, right? There's going to be sort of marginal gains in other areas. But if we want a real paradigm shift, quantum computing is the way to do it. So if we're talking about the future of compute, quantum is the way to do it. But you need to do that separately from everything else in order to be successful at it. So, I think it was what got me to yes in the end was it's the right area. It's the thing to do if you're looking for the future and you want to develop a new technology. We had the size of the commitment and the time commitment which matched the technology and the focus. The thing that really got me to yes was the team. So it was, and I knew the Cambium team and to some extent the V-Squared team before. When I met Kai and Helmut, it was a fairly short 1 hour conversation with each of them. And I called up Dave and I said, Dave, let's do this. So for me, it was the team.
Yeah. And Kai, your journey to the yes?
Well, I think Owen highlighted a really good macro view of what it means to be sort of a next technology or a global defining technology, right? But he also highlighted the challenge as well as the opportunity, right? That when you're competing with the amount of resources, so not just money, but also intellectual firepower and integrated decades of experience, building something to compete with, overtake, augment, provide value in a space like NVIDIA's playing. It's the most exciting thing you can think of. And I've dedicated my career to trying to make quantum computers real. And so my experience building quantum computers, being at what is arguably the most successful startup in the world in the quantum space, gave me a very good frontline operational view of how difficult this technology is. Within, let's say, one corporate structure, there's the give and the take and the priorities and the other things. And for me, this role is a new way to look at the challenges writ large of quantum computing and address them. Obviously, this is from the financial side, but supporting the right companies, strategically helping the right companies, guiding the right companies, because walking this path is very long and very difficult. But this is what I've always wanted to do, and it's just a new way to do it. And so, without Owen's experience, without Helmut's experience, I mean, this is certainly the sum is much, much greater than its parts, and so for me, it got to yes when all the pieces clicked. It's just a really exciting time for the field. It's a really exciting field to be in, and it's a really exciting piece of the field that we're, the role we're playing, as we already said, is one of the most fun that you can imagine. So yeah.
So a lot of no's turned into a lot of yeses, and that's why we're sitting here today, which is a great start. But we are also just getting started, right? And I say we, like I'm taking some of the credit. You are just getting started.
You should take some of the credit. I don't think we also wouldn't be here without your support, Julie. So
Well, thank you for that. 55 North. Let's dig a bit more into the investment strategy then. We talk about quantum, obviously. This is what you will be investing in. But in terms of the investments, what is it that you will be investing in, and how do you support that journey of those companies?
We spent a lot of time when we first started, because we were a new team, we hadn't really spent a lot of time together. We spent a lot of time thinking about, what we're trying to do, what's our purpose, what's our mission, what's our mission. And, we're very detail-orientated scientists, so this was an interesting process. But we came up with, a fairly clear ambition, and that's really empowering brilliant minds to enable the future of computing. And I think that embodies, a lot of the answer to that question. We're looking for great teams, great people. We can't do this ourselves. We don't know the answers, but we know a lot of people, a lot of companies, investors. We have a great network broadly from our various experiences that we bring together, which is very complementary. So we're trying to find great people and give them wind in their sails, the capital, and the access to these networks and try and connect people together in order to really empower them to come up with the solutions that we need for these areas. Now, that boils down into a lot more detail and specifics, and we can talk about that. But I think, high level, that's what it's really about. We're conscious of the timelines involved, but also the risk involved. And I always used to say this throughout my career in venture: if we're not failing, we're not trying hard enough because we're not taking enough risks. So we also need to think about taking calculated risks where the upside is sufficiently high in order to deliver those outside returns that we need to compensate for that.
As a deep tech fund, as a quantum fund, in the quantum field, right? You can really differentiate. Like these people that we talk to, one of the great things is they're the best in the world at what they do, right? But the challenge then is to take what you are the best at and move an idea to a product, to a business, to a scaled up business, to a so on and so forth, right? And so what I see as our ability to, we can't do it ourselves, but there's so much to building a business that academics, professors, scientists, the seed, the kernel you need to build something great and something challenging. It's rare to find / impossible to find somebody that knows everything, right? And so the ability of being an investor with a network, with operational experience, with company building experience, you can really add that lived experience to and build sort of a family type of environment that's supportive and helps grow, right? Because you're basically taking a fully fledged, fully grown, fully baked professional and then building something completely new. That takes a lot of guts and strength from their side, and you can't do that on, this isn't a journey alone. So it's, it was surprising to me to go through this journey and realize it's not just like I ask you for money, you give me money, which is kind of how you get grants, do impactful things. It's just it's a completely new game, and not all the founders make it, and not all companies succeed because their ideas were good or fail because their ideas were bad. There's so many dynamics at play.
But in addition to that, because we have this specific focus, and we invest in both the full stack quantum computing companies and the companies that create the enablers and the sensing and communication companies. So we are building a network of companies that can all help each other, right? So we can't only help the companies by themselves. We can also understand, okay, this is on your roadmap, but actually you need component X that's on this other company's roadmap. And we already know that they're building this a year earlier than because they wouldn't communicate. We say, just, you can actually communicate behind the scenes, make a better product. So this really gives us an edge because we can help everybody. And this is also the ethos. And I think this is something that I really noticed, something that Owen says in almost every call. How can we help you?
For me, a good measure of whether we should make an investment or not is, are we the right investor? What makes us the right investor? Now, if we can help the company in whatever way that may be, it might be connecting them to, team talent. It might be connecting them to a corporate partner that can help them develop product market fit. It could be connect them to a partner that can help with manufacturing. It could even be just, help connect them to another entrepreneur who's had a similar journey, even if it's in a completely different space, because the journey can be similar, and it's a very lonely position to be in. And that support network, that shoulder to cry on, the encouragement, this is normal. The normalization of the craziness that we do, I think, is part of it. But we're not a passive investor. We want to be able to actively contribute to the companies we invest in. So we're always looking for, are we the right fit? Is there something that we can really offer in here? And I think the other thing is that sometimes you don't know the answer. We rarely know the answer, but you have to think about what the process is to get to that answer. I always think about trying to formulate hypotheses, do it in a scientific context. And I think because we speak the language of science in a very technical field like this helps us to, engage with the companies that we work with and with the network as well. So I always sort of say when we're investing, it's like we're buying in as co-founders. It's like our entry ticket to be part of the company. And if the acid test for whether we should make an investment is usually, if things go wrong, am I willing to step in and run this company? Do I feel like I have the capability or the willingness? Am I passionate about this business idea sufficient that I would, dedicate my time to do this? And that's usually the metric that I kind of use internally.
One thing I've also heard you say several times is, and maybe that's also going to a bit of the business model, but of being a venture fund, but it's that long-term view while still having impatience.
Yeah, long-term impatient capital, which
Yes.
is so I think, we're a long-term, we have to be honest to our investors, we have to be honest to ourselves and to our partners. This is a long-term game. It doesn't mean that we can sit around and wait. We have to be pushing towards results all of the time. So whilst we have a long-term view and we accept that things are going to take some time to get to the realize the vision that we all believe, we set really ambitious goals, milestones, and we drive companies and ourselves to deliver on those milestones.
This is already a big fund, 134 million euros.
Well, it's a big fund in terms of absolute numbers, but when you look at the sizes of rounds at the minute, there's the rounds. You can be in a Series B company and be raising $1 billion pre-money valuation quite easily for a full stack company. So it's a lot of money, but it's a very expensive hobby to do quantum.
that was my question. You're targeting 300 million euro, right? Why do we need this scale?
Well, I mean, because smart people cost a lot of money, essentially. So no, I mean, the scale of the challenge, we talked about how difficult it is to build this. And that translates into you needing a lot of very smart people and a lot of expensive equipment to run these things. So essentially, you're building components that are as hard to make as the most advanced semiconductor devices, and those cost billions and billions to make. Actually, I think we are still at a phase for quantum computing where we have not seen the full scale of the costs that we're going to see. But it is important to me, I think especially this is a European trait that we talk a lot about cost. And I think we should talk about value because I think we're at a great space right now where we start seeing things, become very tangible.
But I also want to highlight that 300 million fund is still a relatively early stage fund. Growth capital is the next question that we need to think about at some point in the future. It's a key concern of ours every time we make an investment. And some of the enabling technology is less expensive to because of the more deterministic timelines to retrieve that value. But for many applications, the amount of capital required is large, and that's why we need a substantial fund. Plus, being an active investor, we want to be able to keep our pro rata as we develop. So, as the rounds develop, and so for an early stage investment, that can get quite expensive very quickly, and that's why we want to make sure that we have enough reserve, not just to support the companies, but also to leverage the additional capital that's required. Because that's one of the main failure points of early stage companies is, you're looking for a lead investor for your next round, but then if your existing investors are not able to step up with significant check sizes, then it makes people think, okay, is there something wrong with the company? Are they not performing well? And as one of the experts in the field, there are very few dedicated funds that are specifically focused on quantum. People will be looking at us, and if we're not able to follow on, there'll be questions about why not. And so that's why I think we need that firepower in order to be able to give the companies the right backing and the right insurance for them to really leverage the additional capital from new investors and incoming investors in later rounds, basically.
What is it that you invest in terms of how early, how late, geographically, investment themes maybe? Yeah,
so as Michael said, our investment themes span anything that is quantum enabling, quantum inspired. It's really an attempt to use the team's expertise to capture the most value out of the ecosystem. And so, as Owen said, we really want to understand the tech. We really want to know how can we be valuable, but at the end of the day, it's about solving problems. So quantum computing is one, but quantum sensing for navigation, GPS denial is a big theme everywhere in the world, but especially in Europe. And quantum technologies can help with that, right? So GPS is obviously a very large value creation engine. So how do we create the next generation of that and then also capture that value using quantum technologies? And the biggest returns and also a bit of the most fun investments are at the early stages, right? That's where you meet you have the most influence. You can use your experience to sort of shape from an early stage and build. The building aspect is a very important thing, as a team of scientists likes to do. Seed stage, Series A are where we like to play. We think that's where the majority of the portfolio is. But when a good opportunity, and having a fund this size, we can also capture value from Series B and these more sort of like close, nearer term, it diversifies the risk profile across sectors, across exit timelines, across all these different business models and profiles.
And in terms of where you invest, because that's not just in Denmark,
right?
That
So
will be
this is a purely financially motivated standard VC global fund, right? So we, as Michael pointed out, from the networking perspective, we will naturally. This is what Denmark wants. This is what our LPs want, but it will naturally happen by investing in the best companies globally, full stop. But for, personal reasons, for these nonlinear synergistic reasons, they will come to Denmark. We will build this network. We will use our influence here and our connections here to support the local ecosystem, to guide and help and advise the local ecosystem, to take advantage of the local ecosystem for our portfolio companies. And so this natural building of quantum in the Nordics, this building revitalization of Europe, it's part of the plan through sort of disciplined financial metrics of a global fund.
It was always, I assume, and Michael, now I'm looking towards you, the idea that this should be a Danish-based fund. Why does it make sense to have this global fund come out of Denmark?
So I think, what do you need for a good base for a fund? You need a local ecosystem. And other than that, of course, you travel around anyway, right? So we can absolutely invest in Paris, Madrid, Munich. But the question is, what does the locality add to it? And I think what's very important here is the focus that we see in the ecosystem. So at our launch event, we had multiple Danish ministers speaking, which was very impressive to me. That also showed to me, just their presence showed to me how important this was. Actually, I think that the defense minister was here and Zelensky was in town that day. And I was like, it's not possible. He cannot come here. But he actually joined the event. And
the minister, not Zelensky.
Yes. And in their remarks, the ministers made clear that, Denmark is a small country. We have to focus. We have to pick lanes and then win in those lanes. And it makes a huge difference whether you are in a place where you say, yeah, we're doing everything, or we say, no, quantum is one of the few things that we picked. We're going to double down on it, and we're going to win in it. And you just notice this in a lot of areas. I mean, setting up a fund, there's regulatory aspects to this as well. And you just found that, the system is very welcoming. And just wherever you go, people do not believe me how many people live in Denmark. So nobody believes me when I say how many people live here. They'll say, no, it's much more. You're wrong. And I pull up Wikipedia and prove them wrong. So really, like the ecosystem punches above its weight.
I think Michael makes a great point. I think the focus on quantum, we're not a standalone initiative. EIFO and Novo have been doing direct investments, as well as some of the pension funds. Whether that's a wise strategy or not is a different question. Maybe we can cover that in a different podcast in a few months or something. But I think that there is a very clear focus on quantum. It's not one of 12 initiatives. It's one initiative. There are probably 12 initiatives within that thing, but they're all kind of focused on the same thing. There's Q North, which was recently announced, which is the establishment of a quantum computing system that people can use and develop software and other applications on, as well as the direct investments. We have the Quantum Foundry, the Niels Bohr Institute is doing an awful lot. We'll come to that history in a minute as well, because I think there's also an interesting parallel behind the way that we're approaching this and some of the philosophy that Niels Bohr used himself, which is also part of the reason, I think, where it makes some sense to be here. We have Quantum Denmark, there's the Danish quantum community, and all of this is not just an opportunistic cast of, a few billions of kroner into this weird topic. It's a very strategic, it's been, there's a government strategy, a two-part strategy, And this has been, very strategically put together. I think I also just want to mention one point about our other LP, EIFO. I think for me, if all LPs could be like EIFO and Novo Holdings, I think, there would be a lot more fantastic venture funds out there. EIFO have created they have a really interesting way of approaching this, creating a framework which has empowered us as a team with their strong support to really have everything that we need to be successful in this space. It's also like a shining example to the world of how to do sovereign wealth, like fund-on-fund investment, in my view. Yeah.
And one of the things that I have been having conversations with that I wanted to highlight specifically is like, what does it mean to be strategic? Lots of governments claim to be strategic. And what they end up doing is spending money. It's more like economic stimulus than a real plan. These three very large programs have an operational metric, their KPIs. They're not here to make a profit today. They're actually here to build a strong strategic foundation of users, knowledge-based workforce, right? So their goal is to get good customers and to build good relationships and to look towards the future. You're spending a lot of capital stuff, but then you're operationalizing it in a way that sets a foundation that's actually strategic. I was very surprised by that, and I think that it's going to play out really well.
You mentioned Niels Bohr. Mm-hmm. You also said that you would like to come back to that and how that plays into 55 North.
Yeah, so I mean, it only occurred to me in hindsight, really, but I think it's interesting. We came up with this idea of empowering brilliant minds. And we have a global network with Germany, US. The team is very geographically diverse in terms of where we're all from as well. But really, sitting in Niels Bohr's desk in the Niels Bohr Institute, and just thinking about the way that he approached things. We were at a dinner last night for the EQTC conference, and the archivist from the Niels Bohr Institute, who's probably, he actually, I said that VC was the best job in the world. I think maybe the archivist at the Niels Bohr Institute has the best job in the world, but he presented a really nice kind of, overview of the way that, and Niels Bohr did not care where you were from. He didn't care, whether you believed in quantum physics or not. There's pictures of him with Einstein. He brought people over from Japan. This was in the time of, conflict, with the Germans, the Russians, Chinese, whoever. We would bring everybody together. And quantum, the whole concept that we understand quantum by today, that was the Copenhagen interpretation. And it was Niels Bohr's, belligerence to just ignore all of these political boundaries, bring the right people together, feed them, house them, and provide an environment in which they could have a stimulating discussion, is what led to us unpicking this, natural phenomena which by which we understand quantum today. That kind of philosophy of bringing the right people together, irrespective of their geographic boundaries and other things like this, and providing the right environment in which to flourish, I think it really resonates highly with me. And I think that's something that, as a fund, it's kind of our privilege to be able to have the opportunity to do that, basically.
How and why is it that these investments will, be shaping the future?
If we're looking at the amount of computations that we're doing now and the energy needs for those computations and how those are scaling, then we can see, something like, 30-ish years ago, companies like NVIDIA started creating a new compute modality. They created the GPU. It's called graphics processing unit. Now we don't do graphics with it, right? We do AI with it. It was called graphics processing unit because nerds like me use this to play their computer games. And we had no idea what it was going to be used for. It was a new compute modality that was fundamentally better at a certain set of computations. Convinced we will discover more. I don't know if anybody else that's listening to this is as convinced as I am. So let me give you some concrete and specific things where I can already see that this is, I hope I can convince you that this is actually going to happen. So, and that's on the sensing side. So this is the I'm going to call this the down-to-earth side of the investments that we are doing.
Good luck, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. If you want to navigate very precisely, you can do that with a quantum device. So the quantum device it's just like a gyroscope, right? So it's like a child's toy that always stays in the same orientation, and then you move around relative to the Earth, and then you see, by measuring exactly the orientation of your gyroscope, you see where you are. Now, if you have a mechanical gyroscope, it does work, but it doesn't really work. Not well enough to actually navigate with it. If you have a quantum gyroscope, yes, it does work. Okay, so that's very specific. If you want to move into contested areas, you can do that. There's applications in the medical field, right? So you can detect, essentially with these technologies, you can detect the smallest possible emissions. So it's like one quantum of emissions, right? So, and by emission, I mean something like light or microwave radiation or like magnetic fields. So you can detect a single quantum of magnetic flux. And with that, what are we using magnetic fields for today? So for example, MRI, right? So there is going to be some new generation of MRI technology that will be fundamentally higher sensitivity, cheaper, more ubiquitous, and then you can just go to the doctor once a year and you get a full body MRI scan and he knows exactly what's going on. And then maybe we'll take a small blood sample and do a quantum-based analysis of that, and that's it, right? Then you have your preventive healthcare done. So just to give you some examples of things that may be a little bit more tangible than, I don't know exactly what it's going to be used for, but it's going to be great.
Mm.
For me, I told this story over dinner last night. I worked in a very mature industry. I had the privilege of having my own archive effectively when I worked in my first job. But we had all of these die portfolio, and I had data going back to 1800s in little index cards. They were very meticulously recorded with the chemical structure as they understood it at the time, and some data about the color and the wool fastness and all these kind of properties related to textile or other dyes. And we put all of this data coded it onto a computer, and we built some models. And the models would allow us to predict chemicals that would have specific colors or specific properties. And we could use that to help aid R&D. We could design experiments, and we could then test against the models. It was very, I would say it was AI, but it was a very crude AI. We had a 386, if anybody remembers what they were doing, the computations. But we had the privilege of having all of this data, and that's one of the things that's missing nowadays with AI to get to these predictive models. What we were able to do as well was to do some quantum chemical calculations and see if we could figure out, like, for example, things like the spectra, the color spectrum of these materials. And when you start to do that, you realize that there was inadequacies. Even though we had like thousands and thousands and thousands of data points, we were nowhere near had the ability to predict the real properties of these materials, because these properties are quantum properties. That data was not embedded within the meticulous records. It was some, phenomena that was related to the materials themselves. And even with the computers at the time, we were not able to really calculate these things accurately. So we had to do some experiments still and then validate, and there was some empirical necessary. So we were able to reduce our time from customer request to a product from 2 years down to 6 months. But we could have done it in 2 weeks if we'd been able to predict the actual properties. And this is relatively trivial, the color, right? If we wanted to look at the electronic properties, to look at its semiconductor properties or its charge transport properties, or, the way that it interacts with light in other ways, that would be, more complex calculations. And so skip forward 20 years, 25 years, we still can't do those calculations. Even with the biggest supercomputer that NVIDIA can throw at us or whatever, we still can't do those calculations to the level of accuracy we need to be predictive. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the application that quantum computing will help us to resolve. Now, beyond that, then we can do much more complicated things, but very trivially, I think it's still not possible to calculate the boiling point of helium, right? Think about that for a second. Helium, it's got how many? 2 protons, 2 electrons, a couple of neutrons, and that's already too complicated for us to really figure out its boiling point from first principles. We can get close, but not exactly right. And these are the kind of problems that if we can't figure this out, we can't figure out we can't figure out lots of things. So this is the thing that I think we can really we can open up the space.
That leads me to the question, why now? I mean, timing-wise, why is now the right time for 55 North to be in the world?
Why now? There's been sufficient investment over the period of the last 20, 30 years, specifically over the last 5 to 10 years. It's got to the point where we have sufficient curiosity-driven academic research to have a basic enough of understanding of some of these phenomena. The work that you did, that IonQ did to take those trapped ions and turn them from, like, oh my God, we can trap an ion with some tweezers and we can manipulate its energy levels, to actually we can put a couple of these into a device and we can couple them together and we can get, we can actually make gates from these, and then, hang on, if we can make a gate, then we can start to think about doing logic, which means that we can then do computation. And so these basics have got to the point where it then becomes a question of, how do we scale this? How do we turn this thing into something which we can scale and produce at a large level, at a significant enough volume for it to be useful? And it's that point where venture starts to become interesting. It's not just I can make one of these, but how can I make many of them, and how can I solve problems that are really going to generate value? And I think it's that, the huge. You've seen this year we've had like another Nobel Prize in the field and the recognition and the amount of capital has got us to a point where it's now a question of scaling, not just a question of, we know theoretically it's possible, or we can do it in the lab, to we can actually apply this in a device which can actually be useful for something. And I think that's why now.
I would phrase it, the sort of the visionary investors and founders that started this first wave of this second quantum revolution, we see them out in the world. We see the success, the IonQs, the Rigettis, even the private ones, Quantinuum and PsiQuantum, right? That's they really pushed the boundaries over the last 5 to 10 years. Why now? We now have, as a field, a lot more resources, a lot more knowledge, and we really believe there's the second wave coming, right? That the initial wave is now getting to the next hard thing that they will have to solve, and so by coming in and finding the, let's say, acquisition targets or the disruptive targets, there's lots of value to create and to take the next step, to go from today's semi-valuable systems into tomorrow's valuable systems, into the future's world-changing systems, right? So from a very specific now point, there's a second wave coming.
So I building on what you said, that there was a first wave, and these first wave companies are now partially quite mature, also in terms of valuation also, and this means two things for the companies that are starting up now, or the ones that are young now. If you are a full stack company, you need to come with something new and very good, right? You can't just do the same thing and say, hey, we did 4 qubits. Nobody cares about 4 qubits anymore. So that's actually exciting because it forces you to innovate. And we do see innovation actually in that space. And the second thing is that there's now a component ecosystem that actually makes sense. So if you had if you had done this 10 years ago, you would not have been able to invest in component companies because there were no scaled companies that could buy from them, right?
And the problem set wasn't as mature, and the solution set wasn't as mature, and the hard thing about hard things wasn't as known. So.
Yes, exactly. So, and this will continue to evolve, right? We see this with semiconductor companies today. There's not just one company that builds everything about your computer, right? There's lots of companies, and every company is making their specific component. Even now that everybody is only talking about NVIDIA, right? CPUs still exist, and you need a CPU, and you need, you need RAM, you need memory, you need a hard drive. Like all of these components, they are still there. There's gonna be quantum, like a quantum equivalent to that, right? So people who are making the detectors, the cryostats, the single photon sources, the transduction, lots and lots of components need to go into a computer to make it work. And you used to make all those components yourself because there was nobody else available. Well, now there is, and this whole ecosystem is just going to grow. So this is actually an investment opportunity that just wasn't there a few years ago.
We forget that we've had a long journey and a long history of development and an awful lot of capital, but we need to get to those first impactful applications to develop the revenue and to develop the industry to the maturity where that gets reinvested and you create an ecosystem which then, you know, develops those systems around it. So.
Looking down the road, 7, 10 plus years from now, what does success look like for 55 North? Michael?
So I would say that we contributed significantly to making quantum computing real. And we can do that by, you know, as I said before, so it's our job to pick the right companies, invest in them, and then help them become successful. And because of our positioning in the ecosystem, if we are successful at that, we have to help make the ecosystem successful, because that's how we make our component companies and our full stack companies successful.
I would like to return an awful lot of money to our investors.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not about the money, but it is, right?
And if we do that, it means by definition that we've had an impactful contribution to the development of this field, because you only develop returns when you have commercial value, and commercial value only comes when we've delivered what we're setting out to deliver. So to Michael's point, we're not going to be able to be successful without this ecosystem. We're an important component of that ecosystem, I hope. I'd like to think that we're, you know, a world recognized brand in quantum investing in 10 years' time, and you know, we've been able to contribute significantly to the field, and the side product of that is that our investors will be very happy with us.
Okay.
I guess I could say that, you know, instead of asking why Denmark, why not Denmark, right? Part of being successful, part of having that brand to change in the conversation. Nobody asks why Silicon Valley. Nobody asks why New York or Boston, right? And I think that we have a lot of momentum and a good foundation. And through all of the initiatives, through the continued support of EIFO and Novo, and then, you know, part of our job is to now globalize that. Risk capital will syndicate. We'll get people more familiar, both from the VC side, but from the growth side, from the LP side. You know, by Fund 3, it'll just naturally be that this is. I mean, as an American, everybody wants to be the quantum Silicon Valley, right? Maryland, Chicago, Colorado, Waterloo, which is Canadian, of course, but I think, you know, Munich, and so the competition for, you know, being the defining force in this world-changing technology, the defining geography, the global location, right? Silicon Valley is like, you don't have to explain anymore. Let's make it happen.
Let's do that. Let's make it happen then. Thank you so much to all three of you. It was very interesting to hear your perspectives. Thank you for taking the time. And, well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you.
Thank you.
Denne podcast er produceret af Mazanti-Andersen advokatpartnerselskab. Du kan holde dig opdateret på markedstendenser og juridiske nyheder på mazantipulse.dk.